God bless. This is Mark Anthony DeBello coming to you live from Los Angeles, California, the City of Angels, presenting this week's version of NFL Moneyball. We're in Week 5. For more information on this program and the NFL Extended Strategic Principles System, you just need to go to the web at nfl-esp.com or to my own website, markanthonydebello.com, and click on the Sports tab. So, as I said, I'm in, God and I, he's everywhere. I today am in Los Angeles, California, the City of Angels. I wanted to get this program recorded because of opinions on the Thursday night game, and just wanted to note that it's a real blessing to come to you here from Los Angeles. I've always had a heart and a prayer open to God to have a franchise here in Los Angeles, NFL franchise. Actually drew up a uniform on them, already envisioned it in my mind, and would name the team the Los Angeles or the City of Angels, Archangels. Once wrote a blog actually ranking every of the major pro teams in order of the strength or the power or certainly the godliness of their nicknames. Covered the 4 major sports leagues. And actually, I don't have that list in front of me, but if there was to be a franchise in Los Angeles, I would call them, again, the L.A. or Los Angeles Archangels or the City of Angels Archangels. A lot better than myself being in Sin City or Las Vegas, where we usually broadcast this audio recording. But, again, with regards to the Archangels, I recall on my list right now the number 1, the top nickname in all of pro sports, and you'd want your team to have a powerful nickname. Why not? You know, there's power in the word, there's power in the motivation, the power in the branding. Why wouldn't you want the most powerful or the best or greatest nickname? So right now in existence, I believe, is number 1 is the Los Angeles or the Anaheim Angels of Major League Baseball. Second on that list is another angel, although many people don't realize that. But second on that list is the New Jersey Devils. Yes, the devil is a fallen angel kicked out of heaven because of his pride. So if you know anything about and have studied the Word and actually angels are a part of basically every world religion. They all believe in angels, but the highest of the angels, including the devil, including the angels, are the archangels. No one greater than Michael, the archangel. So having said that, it seems like an appropriate name. Already designed the uniforms, beautiful white with outline black lettering and numerals, not full black, but just the outline black, and then rainbow stripes on their sleeves, and just basic white pants, and then the away jersey, just a midnight black with the rainbow stripes. And then you can also alternate all the jerseys and already immediately have throwbacks in the sense that you can use every one of the colors of a rainbow. You all remember Roy G. Biv. At least, if we don't use indigo, you at least use violet or purple and have basically a handful or more of uniforms right there already for an expansion franchise. So God bless. Hopefully one day the NFL will get a team here in the City of Angels, Los Angeles, California. So I'm going to keep this program just to a half an hour, as we've done in the last couple of weeks. Going to recap last week's games quickly here. Then going to, again, about halfway through or 15 minutes, start taking a look at the power spreads as they relate to those who might be investing in the games. But again, the power spread data is very integral to teams, their coaches, calling basic strategy decisions. So I'm going to review a couple of games off the top of my head from last week, including the Bears. Actually had a few really great, blessed conversations with Coach Trestman already this week, mostly spiritual in nature, but again, as a minister, I don't want to discuss those, but God bless Coach. And, with the Bears struggling, in a sense, at 2-2 and through injuries and travel and, different things on turnovers, he's actually doing quite a masterful job. Now, strategy-wise, He's not exactly following all the NFL ESP principles, and I'll outline a couple of those. And then the second game I'm going to take a look at is the New England Patriot game against the Kansas City Chiefs, and make a couple notes about that. And then, again, run down the rest of the first week, and about halfway through the program, get to the prognostications for Week 5. So about 5 minutes into the program, and as I mentioned with the Bears last week, as you heard on this recording, we figured that Green Bay would probably win in a must-win. A little bit better power-ranked team, had been underperforming. Certainly, they played up to par. But I had noted to Coach Trestman, one of the basic strategy tenets is that when you're a home underdog, which Chicago was, by the NFL ESP system, you're going to be more powerful. You're going to have more motivation. You're going to score and have more production in your first and third quarters. The favorite typically does better in the second and fourth quarters. This holds true through all the NFL games for the last, since I refined the system 15 years ago. So with Chicago being a home underdog and scoring a touchdown in the first quarter, they ended up kicking an onside kick to gain a possession, but did so in the second quarter. They should have done that in the first quarter, and they almost recovered it as it was. And with a 10 to 15% increase in productivity, there's a good chance they might have recovered it in the first quarter. Another reason you want to do that is typically onside kicks, they become more productive the earlier in the game. Actually, from the fourth quarter, where most people do it in the final possession when we all know they're going to do it, down to the third, second, and first. So, truthfully, the opening kickoff onside kick would be the most productive one of all. But, again, you really need to keep in mind when you're the home underdog and when you're the favorite, and whether you want to do the gain of possession as coaches look at it in the first or third quarters. And, again, or the second and fourth. But, again, I appreciate Coach knowing that he was going to need to gain a possession against Green Bay the way the game was going. And then certainly after a couple of turnovers, a couple of interceptions, then you really need to make aggressive strategy decision calls because, as you know, just to give you a basic general of the NFL ESP system, number 4 on our list of the most productive things in all of a football game is actually going to be home field advantage. Green Bay is actually playing home this week. They'll have 4 points for theirs, but anywhere from 2.5 to 4.5 points for home field advantage. Then next you're going to have your X's and O's, and that's going to be your quarterback and the time he spends in the pocket, throwing, when the receivers break off their routes, or extending the play behind the line of scrimmage, or certainly rushing, which is why guys, again, like Wilson and Luck and Kaepernick are all very productive, Aaron Rodgers especially as well. And we rank the quarterback basically anywhere between 1 and 9 points. Last year, Rodgers went down. He was an 8 or 9 point difference just in that mid-season game against Chicago, and that difference showed when they played him in the final game of the season and just missed the playoffs, the Bears, that is. Rodgers had a great game. And other quarterbacks, Cam Newton we rank about 8 or 9 points. Andrew Luck definitely 8 or 9 points. Russell Wilson probably less than that, maybe somewhere around 4 or 5. But again, that's how valuable and more valuable than the home field advantage the quarterbacks are. And then again, number 3 is quarterback X's and O's, or the QB time, we call it, quote-unquote QB time. Number 2 is turnovers, again, plus or minus 3 points, and then the difference, whether it's a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. And 2 Jay Cutler interceptions was minus 8 points for the Bears. Certainly you would hope to make those back when you're playing defense, but to think you're going to pick off Aaron Rodgers twice when your team now has the lead and they can, the Packers I'm speaking of, and have a ground game, that's what coaches need to make as they see they're now down 8 points, if you will, and it could actually be a pick 6 or pick 7 or pick 8, like I said, but you need to be more aggressive in your basic strategy decisions, and regrettably the Bears didn't do much of that as the game unfolded. And again, number 1 is coaching basic strategy decisions. Whether you use the power spread or not, it could be anywhere between 1 to 17 points in team productivity. So if you don't use the power spread data, that's a statistic, not opinion, you're going to not be as productive. So You really want to do that, in order to maximize your productivity and outscore your opponent. Another game I wanted to mention from last week was actually the Patriots and Chiefs game. One of the top, from our data, people who is more aggressive and seems to have the power spread in mind when they make strategy decisions are the three descendants of Bill Parcells, who are coaching, and not surprisingly, all won Super Bowls. Coach Coughlin, Coach Payton, and number one, the premier head coach in this regard, Coach Belichick. However, in the Kansas City game, off the top of my head, I know that first fourth down they had, and they're all Kansas City's territory going in, by the data that had already come up, which I think was a good amount of yards in Kansas City's favor. That first short 4th and 2, so I think it was about between the 35 and 40-yard line, even maybe the 42 or so. The Patriots should have gone for that. It was in their positive quarter. They were favorites, even though they were on the road. I think it was in the second quarter. That certainly should have been an attempt and probably a conversion on 4th down. Later in the game, they had a similar situation. And again, they forsook going for the 4th down conversion and ended up punting. This was about a 4th and 2 or 4th and 3 again, maybe a little longer. Really, I don't want to give you all the data, but you can go for it in that situation on 4th and 5, even 4th and 6, 4th and 7. But you really need to do that, and surely they didn't. They ended up giving up a long run the next play, I think, right following the punt, and then a touchdown. Next thing you know, their punt net or their net gained 20 yards in the punt, but in 2 or 3 plays, KC goes down and scores. So in retrospect, although we never do it that way, we don't Monday morning quarterback, you certainly would rather have had, the opportunity to convert that 4th down. I think it would have really changed the face of that game. Maybe not enough, surely, for the Patriots to win, but surprisingly, Coach Belichick in 2 situations as a power spread favorite, I think both times in his, power-oriented quarters, the 2nd and 4th, failed to be aggressive in their strategy decisions, and that cost them the game. Having said that, let's go in the next about 4 minutes here over the games from last week before we turn on to more investment-oriented type information in the games this week. Not surprisingly, although we love Kirk Cousins, the Giants overcame their problems in the first weeks of turnovers and looked pretty well against Washington. Again, Washington, I can tell you this is the biggest knock on Kirk Cousins, if you will, and it's not really a knock on him. It's just the spiritual God's honest truth that the more you're spoken about, in the media especially, and the more your name is out there, usually in a positive vein, the more negative your performance is going to be. God's going to find a way to humble you. That blessing that you have, this is why humility is so important, and I need it too, because I haven't been very humble, and it's been showing in my production and performance. So I'm just going to give you the best possible spiritual insights and investment information I can, and hopefully, God bless it, prospers you and profits you in some way and is prophetic. But again, once everybody was on to Kirk Cousins being so good, he had a flawed performance. And the same holds true if you don't hear about somebody, and they're quiet and they're humble and they don't have, all this banter about them, and they keep their power, their energy, their the power of their spoken word inside, as does the media community or the general public, and then that person ends up, quote unquote, coming out of nowhere to shine. But again, more times than not, because you don't listen, obviously you don't hear the person who's not speaking, but the person who's more talked about in the media usually struggles, and that was no different in the Giants game last week. So Miami was at Oakland up in London. We thought Oakland would do better, and again, I don't think they're the worst team in the league, as I see in some power rankings, and definitely believe Jacksonville is. But Miami beat them. The Packers were to talk about that game with the Bears. I really thought the Bills were going to beat the Texans. Really think they should have interceptions. Turnovers actually cost them that game, obviously, but they were really scheduled to win that game by about a point, and probably were going to go in on that final drive. Stands the interception. Tennessee played Indy, as we felt, and know Andrew Luck is perhaps the best quarterback in the league and the next Peyton Manning. And despite the team he's on, the fact they're on the same team, but got to love that he's a quarterback's son who played in the pros. And not surprised that Indy walloped a struggling Tennessee team. This one surprised me, Carolina over Baltimore. I definitely have overrated Carolina. They really have troubles on defense, which was their, premier area of expertise. And says great as Cam Newton is, and I like Kelvin Benjamin, they're struggling in the running game as well. So we're closing in at 50 minutes, so I'm going to go over about an extra minute here, maybe 2 at the most, and that's going to give us ample time, 13 minutes, to go over the prognostications for Week 5 as it relates to NFL ESP. The Lions beat the Jets. We figured that the Lions would beat the Jets, and a lot of people in the public figured that. So anybody who invested in the Lions probably won. Jets, like I said, if they don't get out early, get up front early, to have to rely on their quarterback is, he's not very ranked high, power-wise. The Jet defense is still doing well, but can't, last that long. Injuries catch up to everybody, and I want to make a note about injuries because you hear this all the time. I know the Bears are suffering from injuries, and some of these teams, and you don't really hear people tell the truth of injuries. They keep using it when they speak, especially the media, quote-unquote experts, as an excuse. They say, well, this team would have played better, but they had injuries, or this team would be doing better, but they have injuries. Well, what you got to realize about injuries, and I don't have all my notes in front of me, is number one is it's indicative of the quality of a team. Good teams, good players don't get hurt. So if your team's getting injured, it means you're not that good a team, or you're not that good a player. It comes down to conditioning. It comes down to actually being better than the other player. If the other player is better than you, he's going to hurt you. He's going to beat you up. He's going to outperform you, and he's going to injure you. And you can see it through the course of a season. The teams at the end of the year, it's not the cart before the horse or the chicken before the egg. They're well conditioned. They're better athletes, or better, more talented. So they're going to not get injured as the season goes on, and they're going to injure their opponents. So you want to look at injuries, and I see a lot of teams getting injuries here early, and they're typically not the best teams, and they're only going to get worse, and the Jets look like that. Here's the next game was Tampa-Pittsburgh. If you heard here last week, you heard me, God bless, prognosticate Tampa would win that game straight up. They were 8-point power spread underdogs, and they did. We knew Tampa was underperforming. I knew by their data, and had no problem picking Tampa straight up, despite the power spread, and knowing that they got walloped the week before, just as we knew Atlanta was going to have a hard time against Minnesota, and they won, scoring 50 or more points, and I'll get to that Falcon game in a minute. So thank God we're right on about that. Love Josh McCown, is a blessed man, but again, Mike Glennon is a more productive quarterback. San Diego, Jacksonville, San Diego went through the number as we suspected they might, which really goes to lay credence, especially watching New England a little bit, who I still think is going to be there in the end, with playing San Diego in the AFC Championship. So San Diego's looking again like a really good team. The Niners, we projected they would beat the Eagles. They certainly did all that they could do to lose that game with some odd special teams plays and interceptions for touchdowns and a blocked punt in the end zone and whatnot. But to come back from that game, and don't worry, we've got 12 minutes left. I'll get to Week 5. It was really a great second-half comeback and a must-win game by the Niners, but there's no doubt that the NFC West is still higher power-rated than the NFC East, where the Eagles come from. Mentioned the Falcons and Vikings. We prognosticated in the first start for Bridgewater that they would beat the Falcons, and they did. Most everybody, those who invested, I know, invested in the Falcons. The numbers showed, and that was just added proof that we knew that the Vikings were going to overperform that game and beat the Falcons, and they did. The next game, Cowboys and Saints, again, power spread underdog on a primetime game. Cowboys, everybody still thinks are world beaters. I don't think so. We're going to give some final, season numbers on them. Again, some follow-up projections to those that we had in June and week, 1 and second and third week of the season. They've all been relatively consistent in our beliefs. And again, not surprised that they beat the Saints. It could have gone either way, though. If you heard the broadcast last week, I did think the Saints had a chance, but you had to know that the Cowboys were going to be quote-unquote live. Patriots, Chiefs, not a big surprise there, but again, the power spread underdog in a primetime game. And the Patriots, everybody thinks, are struggling and looking bad. Let me tell you something. I'm going to say it once. I'm going to say it twice. This is, if you're an investor, probably the best play, and 95% play coming up this week is on, and I'll get to that in the second half of the program. Okay, and just know our record are 90% plays. Both are 2 for 2 this year, and the higher the percentage closest to 95, the more the stronger the play. So keep that in mind as we get now to the second half of NFL Moneyball, brought to you by NFLESP.com. Mark Anthony DeBello, 10 minutes to go. Let's take a look at Week 5. I'm going to go actually do something I seldom do, which is look at the records of the teams. They're really subjective, the records. Too many people put too much merit in them. But I'm going to go through them a little bit and run down the schedule here quickly. I wanted to speak about the Thursday night game. Minnesota's playing Green Bay. Green Bay's a 9-point, opened up about a 9.5, even in some places I think a 10-point power spread favorite. Let me tell you this, top to bottom in that NFC North, no one team is 10 points higher than the other team. The last team. As good as Green Bay is or leads the division, or as bad as Minnesota is at the bottom of the division, they're not 9 points apart. Even if you give Green Bay 4 for home, that's a 5-point power spread difference. That's really on the brink of it. So really, one turnover by Green Bay and they won't cover, and one turnover by Minnesota and it'll still be close. But again, you just really can't, predict the turnovers. But again, that's too many points to be giving Minnesota, whether Bridgewater plays or not. Certainly is better for Minnesota if he does. But even if Christian Ponder is in there, I can still see Green Bay just winning that game by touchdown. I don't see Minnesota winning outright, though. But again, for those investing, Carolina is a 2.5-point power spread favorite over Chicago. For those who invest, when you see a line open up 2.5, that's typically the house. The people who set the line and who manipulate the line and work to make your money. If you do invest, 2.5 points means that the underdog is live. If it was a 3-point favorite, you'd want to look toward the favorite. Most people, you know what they say. All you got to do is win by a field goal. So they figure Carolina is only giving 2.5. Let's play them. While everybody else is, saying, gee, Chicago can't quite get a field goal in the power spread. I don't think, they can cover. So that game, honestly, still I think is a toss-up. Chicago's had a rough, couple 3 weeks here. Lots of travel, lots of injuries. But again, you'd have to probably lean toward Chicago if you're going to play that with the power spread. Here's a nice one. Tennessee's at home against Cleveland. Cleveland getting points. Did some more, again, projections on Cleveland, and think Cleveland could, if they can get Johnny Manziel in there, still surprise and win that division. We projected Baltimore at the beginning of the year. Cincy, we don't believe will be there. And again, Cleveland, I think, is an underrated team and is going to do well in that game and defeat Tennessee. Philly's playing St. Louis. They're giving 7. Don't have a real strong opinion on that game other than to say I don't think any team in the NFC East, even if the number 1 team like the Eagles, is that many points better than the NFC West. But again, that game's probably too close to call, and it'll all be up to the turnovers as most games are, and Philly is, clearly the best team in that NFC East in my projections. The Giants are playing Atlanta. I wouldn't go near this game if I was an investor. Neither of these teams are good or dependable. The Giants are looking like world beaters lately, but they're not. Trust me, this is a 7-9 team by the time it's all said and done, 6-10, something in that range, and probably the same with Atlanta. New Orleans is playing Tampa Bay. Again, we talked about Tampa Bay already, but this is way too many points. This is sort of the same thing. The top team in that division is not, and that's proving to be a very weak division, probably on the same power spread level as the weakest ones, which are the NFC North, NFC East, and the AFC North. That's too many points to give a team Tampa. I would definitely invest in Tampa. I wouldn't invest in New Orleans if I had to in that game. Dallas 5.5 over Houston. Again, Dallas looking good on TV. I don't believe it's 5.5 points better than Houston. We would invest in Houston if we were to want to invest in that game. Detroit 7 over Buffalo. Again, that division against the AFC East. Might not be 7 points, but I would never trust Buffalo after they should have covered last week and did not. So you would not want to invest in Buffalo again. I would lean toward Detroit. We liked them last week, but I can see Detroit going through that number. But again, that might be a 6.5 and not a 7 because, put it this way, who's investing in Buffalo? Probably nobody, and that's why the house will move that number. So you invest in Detroit and invest thinking 7 is, a power spread that you can cover, and then end up only winning by 6 or 4. That's the goal of the house, is to make money. So, and again, all you really got to do is pray and meditate and think of who the people are betting, and take the side of the house and take their action and play the same team that the house wants to win. Because believe me, they have an opinion and they have manipulated the line so that they win. And they have a vested interest in it. So Indianapolis 3.5 over Baltimore, 2 good teams. I think both will be in the playoffs. It could go either way with this one. You usually would take a classy, better team getting points. But again, I like Indy. I like Baltimore. So let's just leave that game as a toss-up. Pittsburgh 6 against Jacksonville at home. Nobody's investing in Jacksonville, and they're bound to cover. I don't know if it's going to be this week against Pittsburgh, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was, but I wouldn't touch either of those teams or that game. Denver 7 against Arizona. Again, you got another class team in Arizona getting points. I think Denver's overrated, going to be overrated throughout the season, and not cover as many times with the power spread even as they did last year. So, if you had to, I would lean toward Arizona. But again, didn't do a lot of studying in this game. San Fran, Kansas City, 6 points. San Fran at home, I think they're probably worn out from the Eagles. But then again, Kansas City played, their Super Bowl last week on national television and walloped the Patriots. So both of those teams are up for a letdown. In that situation, if it's even, take the points. But again, I wouldn't go near that game. San Diego 6.5 over the Jets. Again, a live underdog number, much like the 2.5. It's less than a touchdown. You'd want to lean toward the Jets. But again, I've leaned toward the Jets in a couple weeks, and they still can't seem to cover. So if they can't do it then, they're not going to do it against San Diego, again, who I think could be the AFC representative in the Super Bowl if they can get past New England, which I think they can. I can definitely see them getting past Denver. The next game, this is the play of the season thus far. One of the plays. We're already 2 for 2, but one of the plays of the season are the New England Patriots at home as a home underdog. Very rare. Cincinnati, hugely overrated by our power spread data. I don't even see them making the playoffs. Again, Baltimore or Cleveland can, actually finish ahead of Cincinnati, but Cincinnati very overrated their first 3 weeks. This is the most opportune time. Even if Cincinnati does perform well during the rest of the year by chance, this won't be the game. If you had to invest in a game so far this season, you have not. You can rest assured New England is probably going to win this game pretty well, I believe. So again, New England 90%, maybe 95%, our first and only one of the season. Usually there's only one, usually, or 2 per year. We'll go with 95%, but New England will cover that game. So wrapping up is Seattle, Washington. Washington home, a lot of points to give a home underdog on a Monday night coming off of an embarrassing game. Kirk Cousins won't play as bad as he did, I don't believe. But again, can you really invest in Washington? And again, I believe Seattle's their Super Bowl representative. So in the last 2 minutes here, let's go over again some projections for the final rankings of the season as I look at the records here. And again, I don't want to give you an opinion on the Seattle-Washington game because I didn't really study. In the NFC, start of the AFC East, Buffalo and Miami, New England, all 2-2. New England, I still think, will surpass and win that division without, and make the playoffs. Houston and Indy top the South. Those were the two teams we projected at the beginning of the year to make the playoffs. I think Indy will get past Houston. Houston will be a wild card. Cincy 3-0, already spoke about them. Baltimore 3-1, Pittsburgh 2-2, Cleveland 1-2. I see Pittsburgh coming in last in that division. Cleveland probably will be Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincy, Pittsburgh, and then definitely watch for Cleveland next season. Unbelievable. As soon as they can get Manziel in there, whom you've heard me say how much I think he's terrific, and the power spread information. And in the NFC West, the big upset here, San Diego to beat Denver, to beat that division. Denver's got a tough schedule. KC, 3rd, Oakland, 4th. But look for San Diego to be right there in the mix of the AFC at the end of the year. Philly and Dallas top the NFC East. I think Philly will pull away. Dallas is only an 8-8 team. I know they come out that way every year, but I love Tony Romo. Don't get me wrong, fantastic quarterback, but Dallas won't be there. Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans, Tampa Bay. That division's a toss-up. I think anybody probably but Atlanta. We only got 30 seconds to go here, but I'd run this out quickly. Detroit, Green Bay, Chicago. Already talked about that. That's going to be a toss-up between those three, with Detroit having the lead as they close down the stretch, and to be a toss-up against Chicago, I think, or to win that division. But Detroit looking disciplined as we projected they would. Last division, San Fran not making the playoffs. Seattle will win that division. Arizona comes second, gets the wild card. San Fran third, and St. Louis fourth. So, listen, God bless. This is Mark Anthony DeBello, NFL Moneyball.